The Four Houses of Midgard. As decreed in 33 VE by the Imperial Senate in the Eternal City. House of Earth and Blood. Shifters, humans, witches, ordinary animals, and many others to whom Chthona calls, as well as some chosen by Luna. House of Sky and Breath. Malakim, angels, Fae, elementals, sprites, and those who are blessed by Solas, along with some favored by Luna. Note: sprites were kicked out of their house as a result of their participation in the fall, and are now considered lowers, though many of them refuse to accept this. House of Many Waters. River spirits, mare, water beasts, nymphs, kelpies, nox, and others watched over by Ogenis. House of Flame and Shadow. Demonaki, reapers, wraiths, vampires, draki, dragons, necromancers, and many wicked and unnamed things that even Erd herself cannot see. Prologue. The Hind knelt before her undying masters and contemplated how it would feel to tear out their throats. Around her own throat, a silver torque lay cool and heavy. It never warmed against her skin, as if the taken lives it symbolized wanted her to endure death's icy grip as well. A silver dart on a Dreadwolf uniform, the trophy for a rebel wiped off the face of Midgard. Lydia had acquired so many that her Imperial Greys couldn't hold them all. So many that they'd been melted down into that torque. Did anyone in this chamber see the necklace for what it truly was? A collar, with a golden leash leading right to the monsters before her. And did those monsters ever suspect that their faithful pet sat at their feet and pondered the taste and texture of their blood on her tongue, on her teeth? But here she would kneel until given leave to rise, as this world would kneel until the six enthroned Asteri drained it dry and left its carcass to rot in the emptiness of space. The staff of the Eternal Palace had cleaned the blood from the shining crystal floor beneath her knees. No coppery tang lingered in the sterile air. No errant drops marred the columns flanking the chamber, as if the events of 2 days ago had never occurred. But Lydia Servos could not let herself dwell on those events, not while surrounded by her enemies, not with Pollux kneeling beside her, one of his shining wings resting atop her calf. From another, it might have been a gesture of comfort, of solidarity. From Pollux, from the hammer, it meant nothing but possession. Lydia willed her eyes dead and cold, willed her heart to be the same, and focused on the two Fae kings pleading their cases. "My late son acted of his own accord," declared Morven, king of the Avalon Fae, his bone-white face grave. The tall, dark-haired male wore all black, but no heavy air of mourning lay upon him. "Had I known of Cormac's treason, I would have handed him over myself." Lydia flicked her gaze to the panel of parasites seated on their crystal thrones. Rigelus, veiled as usual in the body of a Fae teenage boy, propped his delicate chin on a fist. "I find it difficult to believe that you had no knowledge of your son's activities, considering how tightly you held his reins." Shadows whispered over Morven's broad shoulders, trailing off his scaled armor. "He was a defiant boy. I thought I'd beaten it out of him long ago." "You thought wrong," sneered Hesperus, the evening star, who'd taken on the shape of a blonde nymph. Her long, slim fingers tapped the glimmering arm of her throne. "We can only assume that his treachery stemmed from some decay within your royal house, one that must now be scourged." For the first time in the decades the Hind had known him, King Morven held his tongue. He'd had no choice but to answer the Asteri's